Hello and welcome to Center for Victory's podcast of Your Best Day Yet. At Center for Victory, we're here to help unlock, reinforce, and enrich relationships through professional and personal development. I'm Eric Guy, Chief Victory Officer here at the Center for Victory, with one of my colleagues and senior consultant here, Christy Colley at Center for
Hi.
Victory. Talking today, this is actually, if you've heard us on here before, or even we've done webinars in the past, especially through COVID, a lot around mental health, burnout, things like that. That's what we're going to be addressing today. So welcome again, Christy. Great to have
Thanks.
you. I think what we'll do today is just kind of walk through understanding and addressing workplace burnout. You know, when we agreed on this, it was like, yeah, that's like a no-brainer, because we've been hearing it a lot from our clients that are, and it's not that they're doing poorly in their companies. It's just a lot of other things are contributing to burnout, even some things that we haven't had to address even in the past, with COVID and, staying at home, hybrid, whatever,
Yeah,
those
it's a
kinds of
lot.
things. So I thought we'd discuss burnout, kind of it's the role of leadership and what they need to be looking
hmm
forward or into, trying to create that work-life balance, or what, but really integration into
Right.
life. Let's talk some self-care and stress management, because definitely people will be listening to that, and how to build that resilience. And maybe if we have time, we can talk about some of the organizational factors that need
hmm
addressed, and maybe the future of work, because I think people are really looking for that too. You hear it, I hear it. It's weekly.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is weekly. So really, let's kind of backtrack a little bit. And you've dealt with this, I've dealt with this in my own life, but defining burnout, like how would you define burnout and its impact on individuals and organizations?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question to kind of lead this conversation. I think, for any of our listeners today, this is hopefully a topic that they will turn around and have a conversation around with folks that they work with, people they live with, right?
Yeah.
People they mentor. Um, I think that burnout isn't a one trick pony, right? It's like the same descriptor and same experience for everything. I think so. Number one, starting with that, that the term burnout can actually have a very different sensation for each of us as individuals. But I think of it, in Christie speak, it's when I have a depletion of energy. Like I actually, my energy reserve, it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And that sensation might occur where I literally like can't take on a new opportunity, or can't even think about starting something, or I'm overwhelmed with finishing something because I don't have the energy to actually participate in it. And so when people say burnout, a lot of times the real term burnout, it's used to describe when I'm feeling tired.
Mm-hmm.
Burnout is not just being tired, right? You can solve being tired with a nap or
Right.
a good
Yeah.
night's sleep, or, maybe a weekend to just decompress, right? Maybe a way to kind of re-energize yourself and you bounce back. Right. That's not burnout. Burnout is when you're kind of in that cycle and you've kind of cycled through it and cycled through it and cycled through it. And all right, you've hit the bottom of the well. Like you just don't have anything else in there.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where right now a lot of people are functioning as their normative, right? Their normal line, like they're at the bottom of the well. So you just don't have a lot to give.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have a lot of patience. You don't have a lot of bandwidth for listening. Your cognitive ability, right? It gets like a little bit
Muddled. Yeah.
compressed, right? And you tend to, I think, as individuals, we tend to dehumanize a lot of our work, just trying to slog through it or get through it. And that's where I think the tension, the toxicity can kind of come up. And so that's my easy answer to
Yeah.
burnout. And I think we see it in organizations, right? We see it in
Oh,
people, we see it
absolutely.
in teams, we see it in leaders. And it's a very real entity. It's not something that people are just talking about. It's a very real presence in our cultures and in our families right now.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. And sometimes, I know in my case, sometimes it's self-imposed. But
Oh, yeah.
what do you see as like in here? are the common causes and signs of that in the workplace of burnout?
Right. So it starts with sometimes um, uh, workload, right?
Mm-hmm.
Workload challenges, the actual rate of production, like turning out um, a purposeful and appropriate work product, right? Whatever that looks like, depending on what you do. Number two, I think it's very much tied into sometimes uh, missed expectations, right? Where there's like a mismatch, where we're not managing expectations appropriately. I think a lot of times when I work with my clients, especially my like leadership coaching clients,
Mm-hmm.
and I really am trying to help them unpack, like, how do we get here? Right? What are all the things that are making up this experience that you're in right now? And a lot of times, for a number of people, it's not so much that there's actually a real thing in that bag. It was the anticipation about what might have happened, or what I thought my boss was looking for, or my customer was looking for. It's almost like I would call it akin to almost anticipatory grief, which, as we're talking about grief and things like that, that's a real thing. It hasn't yet happened. The loss hasn't happened, but just the idea that this is coming or could possibly happen just robs us of our ability to navigate it. I think burnout can be also similar. I think there's a component of it, which is the worry that I have in anticipation of something not going well, or not being perfect, or a missed opportunity, and almost looking at it like it's going to be a disaster, instead of what it really will be a sting. It'll be a bump in the road, and you will go to sleep that night, and you will wake up the next day and there will be something else on your list. So I think sometimes we do it to ourselves in the way we're framing things. This need for perfection
Yeah, that's a
can
good
be
point. I
really
mean,
tied in with burnout.
yeah, when we looked at, and I got into this a little bit even through COVID, even though we didn't have to travel anywhere, that need or the expectation, so to speak, to think, well, this is going to be kind of cool. I'm working from home. But the work day got extended. And some of us, it was
Right.
self-imposed.
Yeah, totally. My name is
Self-imposed.
Christy.
It's like, I
Uh-huh.
have the computer in front of me all day. I'm not, I don't take breaks. I'm not, even those little
Mhm.
breaks that we take for granted in our workday just for colleagues weren't
Mhm.
there anymore. And we're
Mhm.
banging, 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 banging because we think we're home. And then all of a sudden, you have everybody, you're not getting your bucket filled on one end and you're
Right.
depleting it completely on the other. And you have to be able to balance that too. So I think that's like a common cause and sign of that too.
Mhm.
I mean, I would attribute it also to sometimes um, role, just people in the wrong
Yeah.
role. They can
Yeah.
do it, right? I think we've seen that a lot, you and
Oh,
I.
yeah. Yeah. And in
Uh,
reflection, I think we can probably look back. I mean, I think that's one of the best opportunities for us, in learning about our own resiliency. And I know we'll talk about this a little bit later, but like, what is that path forward when you find yourself in that situation? And I think, for those of us who have the opportunity to reflect
mhm.
on how we've gotten to where we are today, right? We've had a lot of lessons learned. Right. We didn't get to where we are, being able to support leaders and support organizations and people without some experience in what happens, and things happen. And so looking back and understanding what contributed to that burnout, and where were there some decision gates that maybe you could have exercised a little differently, and take that learning forward. It's different for all of us, but I think mismatches with skill demands and attention demands and competency demands will really deplete your energy faster than anything else, right?
Yeah. Now, my opinion, I don't have research to back this up,
Hmm.
but I find a lot of this like heavy burnout when it becomes what you were calling earlier as chronic.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm not sure. I don't think you use that word, but when it's prolonged, it's not, hey, I just need a
Yeah.
nap kind of thing. This
Yeah.
is going
Yeah.
on and on and on and can last for months.
Hmm.
I see a lot of folks that are actually what we would call either high potential or top performers experiencing a lot
Hmm.
because one of the expectations. Maybe it's a role that I don't fit, but I can still do it. And
Right.
maybe it's just I've put those heavy expectations on myself, and now I've just way overextended myself.
Hmm.
Do you see that?
Hmm. Yeah, all the time, all the time. And the sad thing about that, Eric, is a lot of times, we are what we eat, right? So as we're feeding ourselves this narrative around like, I should be able to do this. I'm smart enough. I can learn that. I should be able to do this. And it's not all cognitive that we're talking about. I
Mm-hmm.
can know a lot, and it doesn't mean I want to do the work each day. I know how to do, financial management and accounting, right? I can do your books. I can do our P&L. I can do our cash flow. I had some patient teachers at one point in time. I have the cognitive ability, know how to do the work. And when I have to do the work, I do. I don't like anything about that work. Right?
At all.
This I can do all day long. Whether I know anything about it or not, the idea of this, doing this versus, analyzing something on a spreadsheet is, so much better for me. So although I can do that work, and I will do a good job because I never want to let you down, right? I'll do anything to make sure it's done well, but the cost of doing it well is what then I have to live with, right? Because I've given away everything that I need to do all the other stuff that actually brings me joy. So now I'm double depleted, right? I've
Yeah.
lost my energy focusing on something that brings me no joy, and I've lost the energy I needed for the things that actually bring me joy. It's not a good formula, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet we have to learn the lesson over and over and over again before it
Yeah.
finally sticks. Like, just because I can do that doesn't mean I should do that.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Or it means if I'm going to have to do this work for a period of time or a longer period of time, I have to design a better coping strategy so I can preserve some of that energy I need for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
don't think
Which,
there's anything selfish about it. I think it's healthy. I think we don't always have people who teach us that. And I think as leaders, I think that's the newest like awakening for all of us. That's part of our leadership responsibility. We have to walk the talk ourselves
yeah.
because we're modeling the behavior for everybody else around us.
Yeah. And, I know in the past, as a leader, just the, just in the way that I work, I think, well, don't think, I know I've other people that I've worked with, I've burnt them out just of how I work, right?
Right.
But it brings up a good topic of, really the role of leadership in all this, right? Being aware of it. Um, would you like discuss the importance of how we can create this kind of in our culture or in our workplace culture of creating
Yeah.
more of a sense of, hey guys, what do we need to be looking out for as leaders?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, you and I do this work all the time, but I think it starts with a healthy dose of self-awareness, right? I think we have to know what is normal for us and what's normal for our team, you know. And again, when I'm saying normal, it's not by definition of something that's right versus wrong. It's just what's our cadence of getting our work done? What's our normal vibe? And how are we, representing our values with that, right? Are we actually doing and saying what we intend, right? And so when you kind of have a sense of kind of that norm, then all of a sudden, being present in your work relationships enough to recognize when there's some patterns that indicate something's changed. And then the biggest responsibility out of all of that is in recognizing something's changed, being brave enough to actually say, are you okay? Right? I think that little phrase is so powerful and it is so overlooked in our work relationships. We're so busy, right? We're so busy,
Yes.
and we're like in this vortex. And I think just taking a break and looking at somebody else and saying like, are you okay? I think that's what healthy organizations and talented people and capable people need in their work relationships, to feel like somebody has their back, right? I think that little phrase goes a long way. And, only when you're saying it with intention, right? That now I've asked you the question, now I'm willing to receive your answer. Um, so I think that that's some ways that I'm seeing just the concept and the behavior and the act of leadership kind of evolving and changing. I think it's kind of rehumanizing our workplace,
Yeah,
right?
and I know the answer to this, but I just,
Hmm.
is this something that we should be, as companies, we should be investing more into and teaching people about this? Like, kind of what,
Hmm.
even a conversation that you and I are having, I think would be
Yeah,
extremely relevant for a lot of the companies, just because for some leaders, even the leadership, if you go, you're setting the example of that. You
right,
might be saying, hey, look, let's all be done at 4 or 5 or whatever. But
right,
when you stay till 7 or 8, unconsciously, that's going to set a tone for people that think they need to do that. And all of a sudden, everybody's doing that. Everybody's
right,
burnout. Everybody's short with each other. Not,
right.
we're working longer hours, but getting less done, less
Less done.
productive. There's not
Yeah.
the engagement. There's not the productivity. And then pretty soon, there's not the retention.
Hmm. Yeah,
People
so I
start
think
leaving.
it's really important. I think especially for leaders today, because we have very different workforces. We have very different work resources, right? And I think when it comes down to it, it's making sure that in leaning into this, if you really want to be authentic about saying, hey, I want my team to be productive. I want them to be engaged. I want them to be bought in, and I want us to achieve. Who wouldn't want to say that? I mean, I think this is all like
All right.
really honorable things to say. If we're going to be in business, like let's do it well, right? But at the end result, I think what happens is we treat this facet of work like something that can just be bolted on. So we scramble to bring in a speaker on something, or we send our managers to listen to a webinar about like how to say hello, or whatever it is. And I'm kind of,
Yeah.
lightheartedly joking.
Flipping
I've
it. Yeah.
probably done that how to say
Yeah.
hello
Right.
webinar before, but it's really building it in. It's building it in, not bolting it on. It's building it into our practices. It's building it in. It's making sure that, we talk about having, quarterly check-ins with our employees. And here's a list of the things that you should cover in that. All right, I went through my list, so I guess we're done. Really? So what was the whole purpose of it?
Right.
Right? So I think being present and kind of, you know, again, rehumanizing the workplace, like we're people, and there's a lot of stuff going on in people's worlds that hasn't changed because COVID is, decreased, and
Mm-hmm.
luckily and happily for now, but we also learned like stuff happens. And so I think as we think about what do we want to be known for, right? How do we want people to experience our leadership? How do I want to make it meaningful? I think this is a side of the equation that we need to consider. How do
Oh,
I behave? Right?
absolutely. And bringing it in and piecing it in and making it part of what we do, what we talk about, not just what we talk about, but what we do action based. I mean, that can lead into another conversation of, we often use the term work life balance. I don't believe that there
Mm,
is such a thing. I believe
no.
in workplace integration or work life integration of how to integrate that. But a
Hmm.
lot of people goes back to the self-awareness piece. Um, how do you do that, especially with all these different work environments that we have? We have the
Yeah.
remote, which I'm not sure if I could ever do fully. Me,
Right.
there's some
Right. It's
people that
two of
are
us. Right.
gifted. I was pushing the envelope to get out,
Hmm.
over COVID. But what are the challenges that employees have nowadays that you're seeing with that work life integration?
Hmm. So I like to call it just work life health, right? Because it's holistic. I don't think it's ever really going to be balanced. And there's a lot of us, like, I love my work. I love my clients. Like, I look forward to talking to them. Like, it doesn't feel like work, right? And I mean that for my clients who are listening, like,
Mm-hmm.
hi, you don't feel like work to me. Um, but that's not true for everyone,
Right.
right? In certain jobs, like we're talking about our work through lens, like we do this work, like we need to meet people where they are. Like that's part of us delivering our services, right? Or our product. And for some people who are coding, right? Like, yeah, remote work, like that's the way to go. And for them, that might be where they become most energized, right? Having that space aside to be able to really unifocus on their work. So it depends on the role, it depends on the people, it depends on your company. But I think when it comes down to it, we have a very myopic view of how those work environments work for us, right? Like I really never had the beginning or an end of a work day during COVID when I was working from home. Like I just felt like I worked all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me as an extrovert, like I needed that interaction, even if it was just a phone call or emails, just to feel like I had a connection. It wasn't the same experience for everybody,
Right.
right? So I think part of it is understanding where you're at your best. So as we talk about work-life health, work-life integration, however you term it, for you, I think it's about being able to live your values, right? Being able to see what's important to you be realized in the exchange and interactions that you have and what you're able to contribute. So being mindful of that personal spend, right? If
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to contribute and produce this, I want it to feel like X. And whatever that is, it's okay if it's about being with lots of people. It's okay if it's having some alone time, but just use that insight to kind of bookend your week. So for me, I like to start my week interacting with people and I like to end my week interacting with people because that makes me feel like I've had a good week,
Mm-hmm.
right? For other people, I had a client this morning who's like just entered into more of a client facing role. And she's definitely a very introspective, reserved individual. And she is so excited about this opportunity that she has. But the idea of having to have all these client meetings is so overwhelming to her. And I said, well, the nice thing is, remember, you don't have to carry the weight of responsibility for those meetings. Just ask them a couple of questions and get them to talk about something they're
Yeah.
passionate about. They'll carry that responsibility. You just can absorb the information, right? Make some notes. What did you learn from it? And she's like, oh, I guess I can do that. So I guess what I'm saying by way of that example is going back, you said burnout. Sometimes it's, self-imposed burnout. Sometimes it's just a different way of handling our responsibilities that it unleashes our own talent and our capability, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or it turns the dial and it's what leads us right into burnout, right? We just keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and that, it kind of leads into that. What can we promote, and the self-care, the stress management. I think we need to be a little bit more proactive in this in companies if we want to retain our talent. Because
Yeah.
if we can reach out and help them, obviously if we've helped them, now they're a little bit more, my terms, regulated, self-regulated. They
Yeah.
can do more and things like that, and it contributes to good mental health. But with all these things we can promote, it's definitely not a cookie cutter for sure.
Hmm.
And I see a lot of people looking around and say, well, Christy does this, and then I need to do that. Well, that might not
Right.
be good for
It
me.
may not be a good recipe for success for them.
Well,
Right. I'm
that,
wired in a different way. It would make me sad to not work, right? But it's also very important to me to be really clear in where my work ends each day. And it's taken me like 30
yeah.
plus years to learn that. I actually need that off switch for me. And I used to think that that off switch was needed for other people, right? Because they expected me to be home and I had to pick up at daycare and I had to do this and I had to do that. So it was, oh, I need to turn work off because of others' expectations of me. Right. I need to make time to call my mom. I need to visit my aunt and take care of her. I need to check on my elderly neighbor, or like whatever those other responsibilities are. Right. I want to take a class, whatever it might be. And then all of a sudden, I think in the past, 10 years as we've been working together, Eric, and lots of life changes, right? Career
Mm-hmm.
changes and things like that. All of a sudden you realize you can, your health comes from actually recognizing what you need, how you need to fuel yourself. And so realizing that even for those of us who love our work and that creative energy, that fulfills us, we also need to give our brains a rest and we need sleep. Yeah, I used to say all the time to people who work with me, oh, I'll sleep when I'm old. Well, you know, I am, and I wish I would have been napping a couple of years ago. So, a good night's sleep, healthy practices, interactions and activities that feed your soul, right? That make you feel whole as a person, not just, oh, I got all these things checked off my list. That feels good short term, but it doesn't carry you longer term. And I think prioritizing that for yourself, it's a twofold return. One, you feel more whole and more authentic in your own presence in your own life. And number two, you can't help it. Your output is just so much better. And again, I don't have an article to point to. I'm sure there's some research
Yeah.
someplace on this, but as we're talking about organizational leaders, understanding that point of diminishing return, and we can push, 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 but are we actually getting anywhere any faster?
Yeah. And I will cite research. I can't remember the book,
Mm-hmm.
but I believe it's somewhere around 55 hours. After that,
Yeah.
so you can go up. I mean, those people that wear kind of the badge of honor on their shirt, and it's like, well, I worked 80 hours this week, but how many of it was productive? All
Right.
right. And I'm not saying people can't do over that.
No,
I've
and
done
some of
over
us
that.
really do, right? Sometimes like that pressure is on and, getting that done, getting that, proposal in or getting that sale, like, you can crush it in that period of time. And I used to do that. And now I realize that when I need to do that, I dig in and I have some coping strategies that I didn't have earlier on in my career, right? Because I want to emerge from that period of time and restore,
Mhm.
right? I don't want to go into that same pathway again the next week, another 80-hour marathon, in a sprint. I need some time to reflect because what I think people have missed the mark on is I can get through the work, but the way I get through that work may actually be diminishing my team's productivity, accountability, gel, learning, knowledge, capability. I might be actually decreasing longer term capability because I'm robbing everybody of what they need. So I think that that's where leadership is actually evolving right now, like really
Yeah.
thinking about our practice.
And I think it should, with, just simple things. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of simple things that, we need to validate. You talked about sleep. Again, it was a badge of honor. Well, I don't sleep. I
Yeah.
sleep when I'm
Yeah.
older. I sleep when I'm dead. I've heard that.
Yeah.
But you
Which
need
is
it to
really a
be.
terrible thing to say,
It
right?
is. It's horrible.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But the research out there on sleep, on
Mhm.
one of the things I think, even though we were home more, uh, that at least my clients forgot about that they need to be reminded of is just exercise,
Mhm.
getting out there, doing something, right?
Yeah.
Instead
Getting
of
some fresh
just
air,
sitting
right?
down. Here,
Yeah.
it's good for our brains. It's good,
Hmm.
if you wake up, and I don't mean to go off topic here, but I mean, if you wake up and your brain's just already pumped with cortisol, and
Hmm.
you're already freaking out because going back to some of the things that you've already said. I don't know
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
expectations. I had a 12-hour work day yesterday, and I can't get caught up, or it feels like I can't get caught up.
Hmm.
But if you don't take time to validate that you need that time, and validate that hey, look, I should be taking that time, and I'm going to validate, I'm going to go do it, you can come back and do better work.
Yeah.
Just we're not wired to sit at a desk all day long and
Right.
crank. It just, it
Right.
doesn't work. You can do it, but I mean, the research out there with sleep, with exercise, with um just simple things like breathing. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
doing that, the diet. I mean, holy cow, a lot of people
It's
went off the
it's
rails during
all
COVID
oh
on
yeah.
the
Oh yeah.
diet.
I like my
Yeah,
cookies.
yeah,
So I will tell you, and I think, what we're talking about is really it's well-being,
yeah,
right? Like that's what we're looking for. And as we talk about these things and coach, leaders on these things, there's two schools of thought, right? There's some people who are really leaning in and saying, hey, I see this responsibility. I see this accountability for our organization to be healthy. The people in our organization need to be as healthy as they can be to be their best, right? And I want to give them space to do that in a way that's not prescriptive, right? That's like, okay, Eric's doing this, so Christy, you need to do this too. Eric and Christy are two different people. Like we've got different worlds that we manage. So coming up with an array or a way of people finding their best path. I think that's great, but just being clear and endorsing and supporting that line of thinking and planning on behalf of your employees, like putting words to it, and actually saying to people, here's how I'm looking at, this quarter, what I'm handling and how I'm structuring my time to be at my best. And that might be, hey, I've blocked out, my calendar. You'll find that I've actually blocked out time on Tuesday and Thursday because I need just some administrative time. I need some planning time. I need some thinking time. And I know that if I get that, the rest of the time that I'm working is going to be better time. So I'm going to claim that time and I want your support on it. I want you to let me know what you're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we're all going to work through it if you're in the right fit, like role that you really are engaged in, right? And some of us need to find a different job, right? Some
Yeah.
of us are in roles that it's not about working harder. It's not about working smarter. It's not because of your colleague. It's not because of your boss. It's requiring you to work in a way that just doesn't align with where you are. And that's a scary proposition. But the healthiest discussion is, hey, is there something that I can change in my work environment or my work relationship to make this more manageable, bring back some joy, bring back some energy? Maybe I need to think about something else, right? And and empower yourself to do that. Take the steps to start reaching out, and maybe it's a longer term plan, but figure it out. And I think sometimes just making that decision and that commitment to yourself can also help to curb burnout
Yeah.
because you feel like you have some choice. And I think that that's a powerful ingredient to health as well.
Oh, absolutely. Then it leads to control. I mean,
Yeah.
and you feel more in
hmm
control. You feel more in control than,
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's my plan. It's not
right.
happening to me. I'm making it happen.
And with that, good segue into, how would you instruct people on building this resilience inside of one themselves to the organization?
hmm hmm So I think that comes with some thinking, right? Some self-reflection. And I'm a big proponent of making lists, Eric. I need to visualize. I need to get things on a piece of paper or a whiteboard, right? And see it and get some of the thinking out of my head. But I think really, if you are feeling fried, right, burnt, or feeling like you're on the slide right into that experience, I think really reflecting on what things are real and actually um, impacting my ability to have energy, sleep, rest, the ability to have clear thought, what's real and what's self-imposed, right? Because sometimes we've mixed messages, right? We haven't asked for clarity. When my boss stops and drops something on my desk or zips me, a Slack message like, hey, I need this. Where are you on this? Where are you on this? Do you need all of that by 5 o'clock?
Right.
Or
Clear
am I
expectations and roles. Yep.
right? Those expectations, like when do you need, like, I'm not sure I'm clear on when you are going to actually use this information. That's another way of asking the question.
Mm-hmm.
Not when do you need it, but when are you going to use this information? Because they may not actually be using it until, next Tuesday. So do I need to put myself into that swirl right now? Or do I have some time to get it done? So I think kind of that real and perceived influences on burnout is important. So one, make your list, right? What are the things that are actually imposing stress in my life that I do need to figure out a different way of handling or coping with
Uh-huh.
because my go-to natural way isn't helping me. So what can I do differently? And then what are those things that I've just made assumptions around? I know when I start getting stressed, I start projecting my stress onto lots of different things. So it's very easy for me to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm really, under pressure to kind of get this project or get this wrapped up or this report for something done. And then all of a sudden it trickles into, and, you know, there's no food to eat in our house and I haven't made dinner in weeks. Like I'm a terrible parent and like my dog needs to be vaccinated. Like whenever it start, like all of a sudden it starts going where like everything I look at, I feel like I have failed something. It's just when you just reflect and look back, like fail, just make the appointment.
Well,
Right?
yeah, I mean, I was
Get it
actually going to
done.
say that and ask you about that. Was this like, if I said illogical guilt to you, like, I think a lot of people burn themselves out just because
Oh,
we feel guilty about
right,
whatever. And a lot of times, which, as you said, it's like so illogical, but we go,
right.
go, 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 go. And then it's like, oh, it's real, but it's not, it's fake.
It's right, right. We're doing it to ourselves. And sometimes for some of us, it's a coping strategy, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a trauma response, right? It's aligned with how we were raised. I mean, you know more about this than I do as a family therapist, right? Like there's a lot of times my mom comes out, right? And I'm like,
Right.
and I love my mother, but boy, my mom can work herself into a worry spin like faster than anybody. And you're like, Mom, the world really isn't falling around you. Like, it's okay. Let's just make a plan. And I say that again with great love and respect for my mother, but I am my mother. I see in my own behavior and response to stress similarities to how my mom responded to stress when I was a little kid growing up.
Right.
And I share that with you because we do it in the workplace too, right?
Absolutely.
I respond to stress sometimes the way I responded when I was 20 and I saw my boss respond, right? And that's kind of like in that like silent movie that's always playing, behind our eyeballs, right? And so just for leaders, just realize your authenticity in that and just claiming where you are with that stress meter. Like, you know what? I need to hit the pause button and just and own it, right? And be human about it and give some grace with it
Right.
for yourself and for others. So those are a couple of things that I would mention as we're kind of talking about like the how-tos. Just being clear on what's real and what is, maybe in that where you're in that spin.
Yeah.
And then number two, I think it's being clear with if I do more of what I'm already doing, does that actually help me move through this period of stress? Or does it contribute to it? Am I actually making myself more stressed and more fatigued because of my natural way of moving through this? Like I like to just heads down and shoulder through when I get really stressed. And you know what? Sometimes I need to unplug
Mm-hmm.
and I need to go take a walk and I need to eat a meal
And be okay with it and not
and
feel
be okay
guilty
with that.
when I'm like
Yeah.
feeding myself or when I'm
Yeah.
taking a walk. I mean, that's huge for
Right.
people. And I think, going into kind of that next topic there, uh, do you have anything else that, you would give as far as addressing these organizational factors? I'm
Mhm.
thinking things like, job fit, right manager, communication.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
said expectations. One of the things that I see with especially like individual coaching clients is when they have clear goals, their starts to melt away because they don't feel like they're aiming at a moving
Right.
target. And a lot of
Right.
companies have all these moving targets. I'm kind of answering this question. I'll shut up and let you answer. Uh, so,
Yeah.
and anything from an organizational standpoint that you would say, hey, like here's some things that you need to be really that need to be on your radar if you want to kind of curb this in the organization for folks.
Yeah, and this is a hard one. And I would say again, all companies are a little bit different, but we're all made up of people and processes. So we've kind of have like a common language there, right? So as different as we are, we're actually all the same. And I think time is precious. Time is a precious commodity. There is nothing like time to either enhance stress or reduce stress. So be cognizant of time. If you're going to pull people together, if you're going to make people work together, if you're going to make us come to a meeting, make sure there's a reason.
Good point.
Make sure there's a reason. Make sure that I've had as equal time to prepare for the meeting as I have to participate in the meeting. So, and again, I would say that self-awareness really comes into play, especially at the leadership level. Some of us are wired. We like to talk through problems to solve them. We like to brainstorm. That's energizing for us. It's comfortable for us. It's natural for us to just pop into a conversation and kind of like let it flow, right? For other people, that is extremely overwhelming. They don't feel prepared to participate or respond in a thoughtful way. And that adds an enormous amount of stress to them. So it's just really making sure that you're thinking about that investment of time, right? That investment of time, what is the purpose behind it? What is the outcome? What's a shared goal?
Mm-hmm.
What do we need to do? And I think that approach is something that as leaders, we should be really intentional about training up our management team on.
Yes.
We leave them out in the, like, we just leave them out of all of these just fundamentals, and we call them managers and we hold them accountable and we put them in charge and we send them to workshops, but we don't really sit down and say, like, this is what the role of being a manager is. It's your job to adapt to meet the needs of your team. It's your number one job to build confidence in your team so they're capable, right? How do you do that? How do you do that?
Yeah.
And how do you create the time in your schedule to do that? Because what you got you this far in managing your own to-do list is not going to be helpful to you in managing a team of people where success comes by and through others. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's a different formula. And I think that we have a lack of real skill set in that
Absolutely.
management level, and it creates compression for us as an organization. Right. And sometimes those of us who end up in the leader chair, we don't really have that skill set either. But I think it's really acute at the management level, and they're hungry for it. You know,
Absolutely.
they want to do their best.
Yeah.
They have aspirations, right? And so I think that's where that modeling and mentoring and coaching can really pay dividends in terms of a value proposition in organizations. But being purposeful around it.
Okay. One last thing before I have you kind of wrap up and takeaways. As you look into the future, as we look into the future together,
Mhm.
um, what do you think is going to be maybe some things we need to pay attention to as the work landscape kind of changes, around people's, mental health, what we've been talking about this whole time, burnout, what are the challenges, but also if you could kind of feather in maybe some opportunities where you see as some opportunities for
Yeah.
folks.
Yeah. I think that we're talking a lot about mental health, right? We meaning collectively people in positions across, the world right now, right? I like to say the pandemic illuminated a serious issue that we had that has been there the whole time. Right? Stigma is really real. So we're just starting externally to give permission to actually talking about it and seeking resources, but we have a real deficiency of capable, skilled resources to meet the needs and the demands. So I think when we look at it, I say as we look at public health, right? There's so many clinics, there's so many doctors, there's so many places that you can go for, care. But we look at the community to say, how do we prevent it? Right? So really making sure that people have purpose in what they're doing, I think is at the root of a lot of things, right? That they can see themselves being successful in their calling or their assignment or the opportunity. And most importantly, they feel like somebody's got their back,
Mm-hmm.
right? That even being a leader, just knowing that your team is behind you, even if you make a mistake, that's how we learn. That's how we build resiliency. It's learning from those mistakes. So as I look out, I don't think that this topic, this need, so let's just call it that, this need that we have for mental health, for work-life health, right, for wellness, I don't think it's going away. I mean, I don't think this is like, Pac-Man, right? That was really popular in the 80s and then it was gone. It was replaced with something else. I don't think it's going away. But I do think it's people being more purposeful and looking at their life as a whole. And we've got aging parents. We have children who are really struggling. The largest percent population of people struggling with mental health are young adults. And so, as a parent, Eric, right? I do as well. We're only as okay as our least okay kid. And
Yep.
so, taking a look at that, I think organizations, because of how much time we spend at work, this is our primary place to get access and information about things that affect our whole family, because going home, having dinner, getting the kids homework done and getting them to bed, now I'm at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. If I'm going to get any sleep, like I don't have any time to actually maybe gain the resources or find out how to access something that I might need. So I think well-being and integration and workplace safety and psychological safety, all of that fits in. I think we're going to have to curate opportunities for people to have access to information that's meaningful to them, and it's beyond an EAP.
Right.
Um,
I
and
mean,
it's going to mean management has to participate in that. It's not going to be just your HR department or benefits department or your DEI specialist. None of that can be a bolt on to the real work that happens with real relationships.
yeah, absolutely. I think of, one of the companies that I work with that's down south. I mean, they pride
Mm-hmm.
themselves on having, and granted, they're a little bit larger company. They're about 1,500 employees,
Mm-hmm.
but they have on site for their workers an on site physician, like actually two docs,
Yeah.
right, and a PA. They literally can get called through the intercom. Hey, your appointments. So they're not sitting
Right.
there, not having to take a day off. They go
Yeah.
in, they see the doc, and they come back out. And so they're taking care of themselves. It's help with the well-being. But I think, and I've always been a big proponent on having somebody on staff
Yeah.
that can talk about to people, that's
Yeah.
qualified to talk about people to people about these things, and to do things like goal planning.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that book, The Dream Manager, and I think
Oh, yeah.
every company should have one of
I
those. But
agree. We should put that as a little line on this. Just
yeah,
remind people it's such a great resource. I'm just going to grab something.
yeah. But the opportunities that we have to do that, like, because when we're doing things like that, and people have a chance to talk through it, to
Mm,
validate some of what they're thinking, to get clear expectations, to get rid of their own guilt, to you know to be okay with, hey, look, it's okay just to work. You're going above and beyond doing 50.
yeah.
Because I find a lot of people do, and it is self-imposed, but I think that's a great opportunity if organizations could cash in on that and follow everything that you've given us to this point. I think that would make it very attractive to the younger population coming into the workforce.
Yeah, and I think, you'd asked me a little bit about what's coming. So I think, what we have to recognize is the younger generation coming into the workforce has had a very different experience that any of us ever had coming into the workforce. Their exposure to work, their exposure to in-person interactions and conversations is very different than for me as a Gen Xer, what my high school, college, and early 20s experience of learning how to work was. And so I think we need to be mindful of that. And number two, you know, um, generationally, we entered the workforce that had really largely been formed by those generations ahead of us. Right now, the workforce coming in is largely being formed by what they're willing to tolerate. Right? And so we actually, as they came through the school system, they have been questioning teachers, right? They've been questioning rules. Sometimes their parents join in with them and question
Right.
the rules, right? And I'm neither saying it's great or it's not great, but I think our expectations, like we need to get comfortable being questioned. And I think generationally, most of us as managers and leaders, we're not used to being questioned,
Yeah.
right? Like actually questioned. People might talk about it. It's like, oh, I don't know what Christy was talking about in that meeting,
Right.
but they're not saying it to Christy. No, this new generation is like, hey, Christy, I don't really care what your title is. I think that is a dumb idea, right? Or however they say it. Like, we're like, did you just say that? Right? Yes, they just said it. And you need to be ready with an answer.
Right.
We're ready to actually listen to observe what is it that they're questioning and not taking it so personally, right? But our dynamics are changing. Our work relationships are changing. Our responsibilities at home have changed, right? There isn't necessarily a stay-at-home person taking care of all of these things with a go-to-work person taking care of all of those things. A lot of us are in single-parent households, right? And blended families and all of those kinds of things that are happening. The dynamics have changed. So I think in order to be effective leaders, we need to keep an eye on what's the purpose behind our business, what's our vision, what does success look like, what's the bottom line. Those are all really important things. And you as the leader, like you actually need to know that
Yeah.
those business practices and that outcome, whether it's a nonprofit, right? What's that positive cash I need at the end of the year? How can I support my programs? You need to know these things. But then most importantly, how do we make it happen? How do we make it happen in a way that's healthy? And I think there are ways of doing it. We see clients that do it, large ones and small ones. And it's about personal commitment, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's about prioritizing it. It's saying it's not only healthy for me, it's healthy for all of us. Go home,
Yeah.
right? Don't send emails at 3 o'clock in the morning and texts at 3 o'clock in the morning. Don't do it. Time them. If you're up and that's when you find productivity, great. Time it so it goes through at 8 a.m. the next day. So there's ways we can use technology to help us mitigate some of this burnout. But I think we need to be mindful of it and we need to own our own behavior in it, I think.
Yeah. And this has all been great. Any last tips or anything as we conclude?
Yes, there is really almost nothing that a good night's sleep will not solve. I wish somebody had just been wise enough to tell me that what feels like 100 years ago. Oh, our lights
Yeah.
are going out here. No, and what I'm saying is like it's stress is going to happen. There are things that are going to be disappointing and things that trigger us and things that stress us and make us worry. And that's part of our human journey, right? But I think that's when you flock, right? You can fight, you can freeze, you can flee, but you can also flock. That's when you call in your closest, your besties, your posse, your go-to resources, those trusted advisors, and say, I'm having a hard time, right? I don't know, I can't think my way out of this. I need a different point of view. And you'll do it for somebody else somewhere down the road. But I think that's where to take the action. It's to flock, it's to pull in that group that can help you think of a different way through it versus just going further down into the well.
Yeah.
I think if all of us can just remember that and recommend that to one another when we see a colleague who might be struggling, like I'm here to help, and just give a little grace. I think that's my best advice for today.
That's fantastic. And thanks for doing that. And thanks for all the advice today and just kind of going back and forth because it's such an important topic. You and I know
Yeah.
that. I think other people you either know it or you kind of unconsciously know it. So all good stuff. Thanks for listening and watching today. I appreciate all of you. Leave a comment down in the sections comment if there's other things, especially that you want Christy and I to be chatting about, especially around this topic. We've got a lot. We've been through a lot with this and see a lot of it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. And you could check us out. You can get a hold of Christy or me through our website at centerforvictory.com. And just remember, wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, make this your best day yet. We'll talk to you soon.